Hey everybody, Brian Zane here, and it's time for my review of AEW's Double or Nothing 2021, and we gotta talk about it, the full crowd at Daly's Place. You know, I thought it sounded kind of off when I heard that crowd on Dynamite on Friday. Not so much with here. Whatever acoustics problems there were, they fixed them here, and the crowd just sounded great the entire time. For this 4-hour show, I'm not used to these long 4-hour shows these days, because I know WWE kind of keeps them short, except for how Mania was for nights 1 and 2. But yeah, like, oof, it got kind of like tiring by the end, but it was still a overall, very entertaining, very fun show. And I have to say, the crowd being there and finally like responding on this massive scale to what AEW's been pushing this whole time, it was a really cool moment to hear all that stuff, and I'm sure for the people who were there in person. Also, I enjoy the look of the event, you know, as the show began with the sunset and everything. I love those semi-outdoor venues, that mix of natural light but with a covered area like Daly's Place. So anyway, the first match is Brian Cage versus Hangman Page in a rematch from a few weeks ago. This is a great matchup here, a great opener, lots of fun, just dramatic stuff, hard-hitting stuff here. At one point, Cage powerbombs Page into the ring post at the outside. I love this one point in commentary here. Taz is there for this first match, and JR is like, you know, Hangman Page is going to have to mentally huddle up and refocus and get back on there. And Taz, after Pete, just goes, I hope not. They go full indie with this match, it feels like, as Cage is just throwing everything he can at Hangman, but Page is able to keep kicking out. Finally, Hook shows up on one side of the ring, Ricky Starks on the other. He slides the FTW title over to Cage to use, but Brian rejects it, and he gets a big pop for that act of selflessness. But in the chaos and confusion, Page ends up winning with the buckshot lariat, and that's the match. We see some kind of tension between the other members of Team Taz, and ultimately Cage leaves in a huff. I'm going to give this one 4 stars. I love the combination of just like the match itself and the storytelling and the physicality, also advancing a storyline in a really positive way. Like, we finally see this, like, you know, the trigger is not pulled yet on Brian Cage leaving the group and fully turning face, but the wheels are definitely in motion, and this did a great job, and not at the expense of the match. It actually played really well into it. AEW tag titles on the line as the Young Bucks defend against Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston, and what a moment to see Moxley and Kingston coming out through the crowd to Wild Thing, just the explosion by the crowd for these guys. It was such a cool moment to see there. The Young Bucks, as they make their entrance, have some weird version of like Seth Rollins, one of his most recent blazers with the crazy paint job and everything, and tights I can't quite decipher or understand. Like, there's words like tights and pocket and stuff like on the sides and everything. Is this a reference to something I don't quite understand? Like, how far back does this go? There's a big brawl before the match officially begins, and Brandon Cutler's taken out, and then the bell finally rings. And the story is the Bucks have a big run on Kingston for much of this thing. He's selling the leg a lot. Matt Jackson with this really funny moment here, and Excalibur exclaims it's an ode to Super Dragon, where he basically tags himself into kind of a hot tag to himself as he gets around Kingston. I love that moment there. Big hot tag to Moxley. A lot of big hot tags in this matchup. The Good Brothers interfere. There's aerosol spray to Moxley's eyes, and he gets like hit with the cam, and he kicks out. Meltzer driver on the ramp. Lots of double teaming, and like, this is really where they almost lose me in this matchup, because there's the double teaming keeps going on and on and on, and the referee is just letting this go. Like, I wish they could be consistent with tag team rules between not just the wrestlers, but also the announcers. Because if the announcers didn't bring up the fact that Rick Knox was letting all this stuff go, I might not have noticed it. But it was a really egregious amount of time where the Bucks were just both in the ring together, like, for a long time with no consequence. And, like, you know, we are still accustomed as fans to not see that stuff. So either don't do it at all and don't mention it and don't have JR complain about it not happening in the matches, or keep it consistent, is all I'm saying. I mean, this match is pretty amazing. It's your archetypal Young Bucks match where they get to do all their greatest hits and their big moves, and the opponents not only take them well, but they can also, like, the way that they feed off each other, I think it just really works here. My one real gripe about this matchup is the referee and just kind of his inability to enforce a lot of rules here. Moxley kicks out of the super kick party at 1, but then they do 4 BTE triggers in a row to Moxley to pin and win, and the Bucks retain pain. I give this one 4.5 stars out of 5. A near perfect match, and I had a lot of fun watching this thing and a lot of great near calls. My one problem, like I said though, is just the inconsistency of the referee and just how blatant some of these double teams are. And again, I think the way the tag team situation is in this company is a lot of these teams have these big sequences that require them to both be in the ring at the same time for a while. So again, if they're going to do that, and if that's just how they're going to build their matches, then they have to be consistent in how the rules are enforced and how the announcers, go explain that and talk about that during the show. I think if they didn't bring attention to it so much in commentary, it wouldn't have bothered me. I probably wouldn't have noticed as much. It's time for the Casino Battle Royal to see who will face the AEW champion at some point in the future. Paul White is on guest commentary here, the noted Battle Royal expert on this show. I love this. There's a bit of a thing in this matchup where they'll show the suit to announce the next group and they just hang on it for a very long time. And there's like, the crowd doesn't know what to do with that information. The first suit they draw is, I think it's Clubs. It took me a while. Even Tony Schiavone's like, is that Clubs? Huh? It turns out to be Clubs, even though it was a bit up in the air for a while. And that group is Christian Cage and Powerhouse Hobbs, who I thought for sure were going to be, not only starting this match, but ending it as well. Matt Sydal and Dustin Rhodes and Max Caster with a great burn, with Christian saying he was only interesting when he had an edge. The Diamond suit includes guys like Matt Hardy and Preston Vance and Isaiah Cassidy and Nick Camarado and Serpentico, who's immediately taken out of the match. Camarado and Ten are eliminated at the same time by Dustin Rhodes. Camarado blasts Dustin with the cowbell and he's taken out. So there's your feud set up right there. They announced a match for those guys on Dynamite later in the night, by the way. Matt Hardy and Christian tease kind of like a pop, or tease kind of a face-off here. That gets a big pop by the crowd. And then comes the Hart suits, and that's Varsity Blondes, Colt Cabana, Anthony Bowens, and Penta with some really cool Joker gear. Of all the wrestlers I've seen who've had like Joker themed or Joker cosplay gear, Penta right off the bat is one of my immediate favorites come to mind. And finally, the Spades group is Jungle Boy, Aaron Solo, Mark Quinn, Evil Uno, and Lee Johnson. And Matt Hardy and Private Party work together a lot in eliminating people in this thing. The Joker card is Lio Rush, which I thought was a cool surprise. I'm not sure if he's going to be with AEW full time now, or if he's still doing stuff with New Japan or whatnot, but he's in there and then he's gone like relatively quickly. He doesn't really get a whole chance to do a lot in this match, which is really unfortunate and felt like kind of a waste of the Joker card. I mean, hopefully more things can be done with him while he's with AEW and maybe have some good matches, but I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of here and gone moment with the Joker card here. And so anyway, Matt and Private Party are working together a lot. Eventually, Private Party's eliminated. There's a great moment where Matt's surrounded by Christian and Jungle Boy, and Matt's trying to appeal to Christian by going, oh, yeah, Hardy Boys, and do the 5-second poses, trying to appeal to him, but it backfires. So Hardy's out. You're down to Christian and Jungle Boy, and those two work really well together. A lot of cool close calls, and ultimately Jungle Boy eliminates Christian to win the match. And it's a big emotional thing here where the Jurassic Express go out to celebrate with him, and the fans singing along to Jungle Boy's theme, Tarzan Boy, is just, it was great to hear that stuff. Christian gives him the seal of approval and shakes his hand and everything. So I'm going to give this match 3.5 stars out of 5. I think it was an above average battle royal. There were a couple of cool moments in there that continue storylines for some of the mid-card guys like Dustin Rhodes and Camarado, for example. The ending sequence with Christian and Jungle Boy was great. Again, I think it was just kind of an interesting, curious choice for the Joker to be Lio Rush and to have him eliminated so quickly like that. It just seemed kind of anticlimactic on that one. We get a big Memorial Day video package, which segues perfectly into our next match. Anthony Ogogo taking on Cody Rhodes for the Soul of America on the line. And oh my God, that entrance for Cody, the Americanized version of his theme with the strings and the brass thrown in as well. And that robe he had, looking like a proper Street Fighter character or Homelander or just this big anime villain with this ridiculous robe. Okay, almost kind of like Bioshock Infinite vibes is what I got out of this one. It was just, and the intro, the American flag boots were also pretty intense too. And the intro was the grandson of a plumber, the son of the common man, and a father to be. Like, ooh man, chills with this big thing. Cody was definitely over his heck with this. Like, I've had my druthers about this angle, but son of a bitch, Cody's over, and USA, big chance happening in this one. Cody does withstand more bolo punches to the gut that Ogogo's other opponents have felt up to this point, and it didn't seem to affect him quite as much as, say, like Austin Gunn, for example. But Ogogo does have some good moves on Cody. There's an awkward moment in which Cody is like bounced off the ropes, and I don't know what happens, but both guys are down, and Ogogo all of a sudden very clearly is getting bladed by QT Marshall on the outside, because he turns around and he's got this cut over his eye and he's bleeding. There's a very nice frog splash by Ogogo as well in this thing after he punches Cody off the corner. There's a figure four. It's reversed when Ogogo punches Cody in the mouth. He's just down for a little bit. Cody is just punched silly, but falls too close to the ropes for Ogogo to capitalize on that. Cody comes back and hits the vertebreaker to win here. I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars out of 5. I think it was a good showing for Ogogo on such a big stage against Cody, this big rarefied air that he's in here. I think the match was a little long. I'm not too disappointed with the finish. It wasn't like something where Cody hulked up out of the punches or something, but it was, it was just, it was an okay match, the best way to put it. And I think it's the best you could ask for such a relative newcomer like Ogogo. Cody, like I said, Cody himself is over, but there were a couple of points in this match itself that just felt like they weren't, which I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the vibe I got from watching this. Miro defends the TNT Championship against Lance Archer here, and it's a brawl from the get-go. There's fighting on the outside, and Miro just slammed through a table like in the early going, which seemed like a waste of a table spot. It just kind of came from out of nowhere. It wasn't really brought up again. It was just, yes, these guys are destructive, but you could do that without just kind of like, oh, here's this table and it's done now. There's a moment as well where there's a suplex over the barricade and into these guys who are clearly extras catching the guy. Honestly, I think the match improves a lot once they get back into the ring and just do the things that they can do well in there. I think a lot of the stuff on the outside felt kind of rushed, and it was just like, okay, it's there, and then like you forget about it within an instant. Jake Roberts shows up. Now, he was sucker punched by Miro the day before at the weigh-in, so he was questionable for this one. He shows up with the bag, presumably with the snake in it. Miro picks it up and hurls it onto the ramp, and it just tumbles in a big heap. And that was weird. I mean, we've seen the snakes in the history of wrestling be assaulted before, famously Earthquake squashing Damien and the Quake Burgers and everything. We've seen it done before, maybe not so graphically as what we saw with like just this chucking the snake several yards, up the ramp and stuff. And also, I don't know, I just feel like the bag looks fake as hell anyway when Jake has it and just threatens to do anything with it. So it's like when it flopped around there and looked even more fake, it looked like it was just a bunch of like rolled up socks in there. It wasn't like a snake figure in there. So either you just kind of expose how fake the bag looks in there, or there's a real snake in there and PETA's gonna come calling. Archer harkens back to his old TNA days working with Monty Brown and hitting the pounds, but Miro does recover. He puts Archer in this big submission from behind, and Archer passes out. Referee calls it. Miro wins and retains. I'm gonna give this one 3 stars out of 5. This match could have been better. I was really looking forward to this one being a sleeper hit for match of the night because I just love big hoss fights, and I think they could have done. It was okay. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. The snake moment almost took me out of it with the the whole kind of the immersion thing, because we've seen the snake bag before, and I just always hate it because it always looks so fake compared to like how it used to look back in the day. They announced that All Out's happening in Chicago on September 6th, so moving out of the comfort of Daly's place in the very near future as they announced their welcome back tour and stuff. And then we go to our women's title match as Hikaru Shida defends against Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. Shida, seeing the emotion on her face when she comes out there and there's the crowd cheering and he gets a little choked up. It got me a little choked up watching that. You just love to see that, and I can't imagine just what kind of good vibes these wrestlers are feeling coming back and seeing this full crowd again. That's got to be an amazing feeling. And this match is an amazing match. There's good stuff early on as well. Shida ramming Britt into the barricade, diving off the turnbuckle onto her and Rebel. Britt with a curb stomp, and she gets this custom glove out for the lockjaw. And I love the glove. At one point, though, there is a bit of a valley in this match where I don't know what happens, and it doesn't ruin the match, but there is a period here where it feels like things get a little clunky. a little snug, like they got to give each other receipts for some reason. It almost took me out of it, but they did recover fairly well here. Britt is super aggressive at the end, continually fighting for the lockjaw and everything, and she kicks out of so much stuff. She kicks out of the Falcon Arrow and the Tamashi. Britt gets the lockjaw back in, and Shida ultimately taps, and Britt has won the AEW Women's Championship after what feels like a long time of foreseeing it, just in terms of when she got signed to the fanfare she had with it. And now she finally gets it. And she gets a hug from Tony Schiavone on the stage afterward, which was just warmed the cockles of my heart. I'm going to give this one 4 stars out of 5. Like I said, the match almost lost me in that middle part where I don't know what happened or if someone got hurt or what the deal was, but I think they recovered well enough, and the beginning and the end were just great. A really terrific conclusion, and I think it's a great story there. And again, Britt Baker has come so far in like the year and a half, 2 years since AEW's been around, and kind of being this like not too interesting babyface, and then she gets hurt, and then there's the story, the path she's been on ever since then has just been, really well executed, and I think this is her validation here. Sting makes his official live in-ring return for the first time in 6 years, teaming with Darby Allin against Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky. Before the match, we get a little video where there's a cool dad Sting picking up his son Darby on the way home from school and everything. And the fucking pop for Sting, my God, just the reaction, the explosion from the crowd when he made his way out of the tunnel was great. And then Sting's not done, because before the match officially begins, they're brawling, and Sting, he pops up after a suplex on the ramp, shoves Scorpio Sky off the poker chips, and then does a dive onto he and Ethan Page. It's crazy. This 60-year-old man who 6 years ago we thought was done forever because he broke his neck in the ring, comes back and still is kicking ass in this match. He has some great spots in this thing, and the fans are totally into it. Sting looks great here. Page and Sky working over Darby for a while. At one point, Ethan just hurls Darby into the front row, and again, it's another spot with extras into the barricade and stuff. We saw it in the Miro Archer match. We see it here. There's a couple times in this show where there are some repeating elements, and this is one I don't think you can do more than once. Like barricade and into fans and stuff, like you can't really, I felt they kind of overdid it with 2. 2 in one show I think is too much, even for a 4-hour show. And if you're going to do 2 in one 4-hour show, space them apart a little bit farther. Sting with a hot tag and a stinger splash, and what could best be described as a soft code red. Like he pulls it off, but it's not like one big like flipping motion. It's just kind of a slow roll across. Sting tags Darby back in. There's a bit of a fracas. Sting with a Scorpion Deathlock, and Sky's got the heel hook on Darby. And then you got Page and Darby in the middle, and they're kind of like slapping each other, not really selling the submissions anymore. And the Scorpion Deathlock I think should be pretty well protected, but like Page is too busy gouging out Darby's eyes when he does it and everything. It's probably a little ridiculous. You finally have some one-on-one time with Sting and Scorpio. Sting gets the Scorpion Death Drop after blocking Scorpio's finisher to win the match. So yeah, give it up for Sting. That match fucking ruled for him. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars because it was fun to see that. I think they used him in the right ways and used the right beats. I think there was still some of that 5 count legal man syndrome we saw in the tag title match I didn't like, and we saw it a little bit in this one too, which takes it a bit down for me. But besides that, a lot of fun to watch this thing. And I think that much like what I was saying about how, hey, Cody is over based on listening to how the crowd reacts to him. Same thing with Sting here. Many people have talked about how Sting's been overused or not used properly in AEW, and there's an argument to be made about he was on TV way too much, and the stuff with he and Darby took a long time to really get going, and all that stuff, but you can't say he's not over, because listen to that fan reaction out there, and how they just exploded for him for everything he did. And isn't that all that really matters in the end? It just seems like, people are going to complain, he beat up 2 young guys and he beat them. Like, who cares? It's Sting, who's still kind of in that upper echelon. And if he can go like that and look good in the way he did, and the crowd loves every single thing he does, what's the problem? Kenny Omega defends the AEW World title against Pac, and the real underdog in this matchup here, Orange Cassidy. Kenny Omega walking out with all 4 of his belts was a really cool look. I love in this match, there's a lot of great transitions from like working, like these 2 people work each other, these 2 guys work each other, all 3 guys are in the ring now. And just the way they kind of build up on that and go from kind of movement to movement in the match, I think was pretty well done, very seamless. There's a great moment where Omega with this big Sparta kick to Pac and just kicks him halfway across the ring into the corner. At one point, Pac with an amazing avalanche Falcon Arrow, and then Orange runs in and gets him out of the ring and almost steals the win from Kenny, but he kicks out. A lot of great close calls and near finishes in this match where you almost believe that the unthinkable could happen in this one. Orange like hits the beach break, a punch and a beach break onto Kenny, and there's a kick out. Hits the orange punch again. You hear Don Callis yelling, "Ah, shit, shit!" And like man, there's a lot of crazy overbooking near the end of this thing here because there's a referee bump. Don Callis pulls the referee out, and there's all this madness. And there's a moment here where Orange finally has the cover. Aubrey Edwards runs in, but there's a 2 count, and then as he's pinning, Kenny kicks out, rolls Orange up to pin and win and retain this championship. I give this one 4.5 stars out of 5. I loved this matchup here. And you could argue maybe this could have been the main event over Stadium Stampede. I think it was that good of a match. High drama, and deep down, you know, we all knew Kenny was going to retain, but, and I've said this before on the channel, things can be predictable. Like, you know, I don't think, you know, it would have been fun if Orange Cassidy won or even if Pac won, but I think it was kind of obvious how it was going to go. But even with the predictable and the obvious, what matters to me is how you get from point A to point B, how you tell that story. And like I said, there were a couple of moments in this matchup where you almost believed that it could happen. And they were very good at doing that. And so I got to give them their props. I think there's some great athleticism. It was a great story. And yeah, a great semi-main event. They announced that Full Gear is coming to St. Louis on November 6th. And then Schiavone with an announcement regarding a new analyst for AEW Rampage, the new program that's going to be coming out later on. And he's going to be a coach for AEW as well. It's Mark Henry, only a recently inducted Hall of Famer with WWE, and who I thought, kind of like with Paul White, was going to be like a lifer with that company. And so the fact that AEW is able to sign away these like really respected names who might not have anything to offer as wrestlers anymore, but still have these brilliant minds and can be great analysts or recruiters or coaches, and just like having all that wealth of knowledge, that's a really amazing thing they can do. And if AEW is able to do that with the people they have obtained in the last couple of years, it's really crazy to think, you know, how the landscape might change in that regard in years to come as far as the future of the companies, respective companies, and how recruiting goes. Then it's time for your main event, the Stadium Stampede 2, as the Pinnacle take on the Inner Circle. And there is just a lot of wild, mad stuff to recap in this match, but I'm probably going to miss a couple of things here. The basic thing you need to understand here is they basically split off into kind of like the predictable chunks where MJF and Jericho fight each other almost exclusively. FTR fight Santana and Ortiz, Wardlow and Jake Hager, Sammy Guevara, and Shawn Spears. And each of these groups have their own arcs. Each of them are, you know, interesting in their own ways. Like Wardlow and Hager, for example, is them just like beating each other up and like just breaking stuff. There's a big fake wall at one point that Hager's thrown into. There's random fire pits outside the ring as well that are used like one time and never again. Everyone's brawling. Jericho and MJF chase each other down to the arena. There's a fight in the cafeteria, and like Urban Meyer and Charlie Strong, who are coaches for the Jaguars, they make a cameo appearance, and Meyer going, "Holy shit," as MJF and Jericho are fighting through like the trainers area and everything. Things get weird with the Wardlow Hager match because at one point they fight into a big like freezer area where these very obvious fake pig carcasses hanging from like the hooks and everything. It's the off season. Why do they need a pig? And I bet you they don't prepare the fucking meat there at the arena. They probably get it like it's already like chopped up and stuff. Like, are they getting like the full pigs and things? I'm not entirely sure about that, why you would have that there when it's the off season. And speaking of that, with like the random like meats hanging, raw carcasses hanging from the rafters of this ice room, the FTR and Santana and Ortiz scene is at this club in the stadium, which is open for some reason, despite, again, no games are being played right now at the stadium. And they just beat up these poor innocent extras watching, you know, sitting there in the club as they have their fight. Tully Blanchard dressed like FTR with the sleeveless shirt and the bandana. It's an interesting look for sure. And they're all brawling, and there's like a million shots, the trash can and everything, and there's fighting into the elevator. Oh, also one thing I forgot to mention about Hager and Wardlow is that when they're in the ice box, at one point someone threatens to stab the other with an icicle. Like, come on, what is happening here with this matchup? Sammy Guevara finds Shawn Spears in a room full of chairs and dramatic lighting. It's one of those moments where I'm like, I was expecting a bit of more of a serious Stadium Stampede match, and like These things were goofy, but they weren't like funny goofy. They were just like, this is a very interesting setup they have here. Also, one thing I thought was cool about the bar fight, I'm going back and forth in here, similar to how they go back and forth in this matchup. Conan makes a cameo appearance as the DJ in the club scene with FTR and Proud and Powerful, and he gets a huge pop as they're all fighting and everything. He prevents Tully from attacking with a pipe at one point. MJF and Jericho fight their way in the corporate offices, big pile driver on the big wooden conference table in there. For whatever reason, there's a claw hammer in this conference room, and MJF's threatening Jericho with it, but Jericho produces Floyd, the bat, which he has hidden in advance apparently, so what's going on with that? Sean Spears, after he handcuffs Sammy Guevara, he's chased down the hallway by the Inner Circle Motorcycle Club, which I'm like, was that a thing? I forgot that was a thing. And for Excalibur, I know it's pre-taped, but for Excalibur just to immediately jump on, that's the Inner Circle Motorcycle. For probably less than 1 second of looking at him, he can identify who those guys are. We are live. We go from pre-taped to live. MJF is now bleeding. He's being chased through by Jericho. They're on the upper deck and they're fighting. Jericho powerbombs MJF onto this box. And that's not the end of the match, though, because the end of the match actually comes with Spears and Guevara, who are wrestling each other in the ring. And there's no other, I was expecting more team members would start kind of like filing in, but we didn't really get that. So it's down with Guevara and Spears, and Guevara fights back from the chair attacks and everything. Sammy stomping Sean face first into the chair, hits a beautiful, crazy 630 to win the match. So it's quite a turnaround for Sammy, because from last year, taking the one-winged angel onto the big box and taking the pinfall in the first Stadium Stampede, to come back and to get this big moment on your own without help from anyone else in the group, and you kind of do a make good, kind of making up for that loss in last year to be the one to win for the Inner Circle. Then the rest of the group show up and they have a big hug and a bow as we fade to black. So I'm going to give Stadium Stampede 2 4 stars out of 5, and that might seem a bit high, but in fairness, the first one I gave 6 stars out of 5, so that's your curve basically. It's hard to live up to the infamy and the lofty standards set in the first Stampede match. And I was really going into this one thinking that they were going to almost play it more straight. And I think they did that to an extent. But then there were just these moments where I'm like, oh, I was not expecting this. I was not expecting FTR and Tully Blanchard to be in this kind of goofy bar thing with Santana and Ortiz, where they fight the crowd on their way to each other and sharing a drink with each other. I thought it was weird to see Wardlow and Hager fight in a meat locker with fake hanging pig and threatening to stab with an icicle. I thought it was Sean Spears being in the chair room with the spotlight on him and them clacking the chair down. That was a bit strange. On the whole, it was still a very fun match. There were a lot of wild and very entertaining moments throughout, but for whatever reason, this one just didn't hit me the same way the first one did. And there might be some external factors having to do with that one. With like the first Stadium Stampede, it was still very early in the pandemic. Things were still very different and still trying to find their footing as far as wrestling was going. And it was so novel and it was so different. We didn't know what to expect. This year, there's a bit more of an expectation. So again, there's a lot of hype involved, but there's also a lot of like tempered expectations, because like they can't possibly be as goofy and silly as they were last time, right? But how do they try and like meet that? It was a very interesting match. I think still very fun main event, but compared to the first one, not quite as good. My grade for Double or Nothing 2021 is an A-. I think this was overall a fantastic showing for AEW for their first major show in front of a capacity crowd. And I gotta say, there are some things about this show that weren't great. Like I think Anthony Ogogo and Cody Rhodes was and then Miro and Archer was a bit of a disappointment for me. Miro and the snake thing I thought was stupid for, it's either or. Either way you spin that, the whole snake thing didn't look very good. Some bad referee moments, especially in the tag matches. And again, just kind of going to the well one too many times with like the extras and the barricade and everything. Repeating the same spot essentially. But those nitpicks can't overcome just how awesome most of these other matches were on the card, and how just the drama they had here. I think there's almost a problem with like every match trying too hard to be the match of the night, because there were a lot of contenders for it on this show, in my opinion. A lot of great moments, and what really, again, puts it over the edge and makes it such a great show is just that feeling of the crowd being back, man, and being back to, some kind of, normalcy is what you would call it. But it was great to hear, and I think, even before, in the before time, a great crowd, or a crowd in general, can make or break a show. And I think we all were kind of like, we're all happy and we're all glad to see this kind of back to the way things used to be. And yeah, this crowd was great and they were in it the whole time and made this show a big chunk of what it was. And so, yeah, I really have, there's a couple things where I'm like, these things didn't really work out, or I thought, there was just a couple of things that almost took me out of the show or out of those particular matches. But everything else about the show, I think, helped to elevate it. And again, the crowd really helping sell a lot of what we saw here, I think just added to it and made it work. But what did you think of Double or Nothing? The matches and the outcomes and the announcements? I want to hear what y'all have to say in the comment section below. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.